His right here feels like one of those NASCAR weeks where you can already tell the garage is about to get real tense. Because what happened after Watkins Glen was not just another frustrating finish or drivers blowing off steam for 5 seconds after the checkered flag. This thing suddenly turned into something way bigger, and honestly, it feels like the entire Cup garage is watching closely right now. At first, it looked like just another emotional post-race moment. Tempers were high, adrenaline was pumping, and drivers were upset after a brutal day at one of the toughest road courses on the schedule. We have seen that before. But then more details started coming out. More footage, more reports from inside the garage, and now NASCAR itself is reportedly stepping in to review everything that happened afterward. And the craziest part is that depending on what officials decide, this could actually impact the next race weekend in a massive way. There are a lot of fans split on this already. Some people think emotions are part of racing and drivers should settle things face to face. Other fans think NASCAR has no choice but to come down hard if things crossed a certain line. And honestly, once you hear both sides of these stories today, you will understand why this whole situation is exploding across the NASCAR world right now. So if you are a real NASCAR fan and you love staying on top of everything happening inside the garage every single week, hit that like button, subscribe to NASCAR Nation Report, and help us chase that goal of 15,000 subscribers. This channel is still growing, and being here this early honestly means a lot. The whole thing started right after the finish at Watkins Glen, and honestly, it completely changed the mood coming out of that race. What should have been a relatively calm post-race atmosphere suddenly turned into one of the biggest talking points in NASCAR this week because Bubba Wallace went straight to Christopher Bell on pit road for a heated confrontation that had everybody looking over wondering what exactly was happening. Fox cameras caught almost the entire exchange live while post-race interviews were going on, and you could instantly tell Bubba Wallace was furious. He was animated, talking with his hands, clearly trying to get his point across, while Christopher Bell mostly stood there with that same calm demeanor NASCAR fans know him for. Bell did not look emotional at all at first, which honestly almost made the tension feel even more awkward because Bubba was visibly heated, and then came the moment that really got fans talking. Wallace looked like he was about to walk away, but something Bell said pulled him right back into the conversation for another exchange. Crew members were nearby, NASCAR officials were watching closely, and suddenly the entire focus after Watkins Glen was not even about the winner anymore. Everybody was talking about Bubba Wallace and Christopher Bell. Now, the important thing here is that this did not happen in a vacuum. Bubba Wallace had already gone through an absolutely frustrating day at Watkins Glen before the confrontation ever happened. He managed to grab a stage point earlier in the race, but the ending completely unraveled for the 23 team. Late in the race, Wallace got spun after contact from John Hunter Nemechek, who was on fresher tires and trying to move through traffic aggressively. A lot of fans immediately debated whether Nemechek was too impatient there, because Bubba was one of several drivers trying to save both fuel and tires during those closing laps. The 23 car was vulnerable, and instead of waiting for a cleaner opportunity, Nemechek forced the issue. Wallace paid the price and ended up buried in the results with a 29th place finish. And honestly, you could feel the frustration building. For Bubba Wallace, this was not just one bad corner at Watkins Glen. This season has already had enough ups and downs for the 23 team, and another disappointing finish at this stage of the year hurts badly when playoff pressure is starting to rise. Every point matters right now. Every bad result starts adding stress inside the garage. So when the race ended, emotions were already boiling over. What still has fans confused is exactly why Christopher Bell became the focus of Wallace's frustration after the race. Bell was not involved in the spin with John Hunter Nemechek, which is why the confrontation caught everybody off guard. Some people inside the garage believe there may have been something that happened earlier during the race that television cameras did not fully catch. Others think Bell may have said something after the finish that escalated tensions. But publicly, neither driver really explained the details Sunday night. Bubba Wallace briefly downplayed the situation while leaving the infield, and Christopher Bell avoided giving reporters a detailed explanation too. That silence honestly made the story grow even bigger because NASCAR fans immediately started speculating online. And then Monday came, and suddenly this thing became way more serious. According to multiple reports, NASCAR officials are now actively reviewing post-race footage and radio communications from the incident between Bubba Wallace and Christopher Bell to determine whether the confrontation crossed the line from verbal arguing into physical contact. That right there completely changes the situation, because if NASCAR determines this was more than just yelling on pit road, penalties could absolutely be coming. Officials are reportedly reviewing additional camera angles from pit road, team broadcasts, and internal footage because the television broadcast did not provide a completely clear view of the entire interaction. And here is where the tension inside the garage gets real. Sources familiar with the review process reportedly told ESPN that NASCAR is discussing possible penalties ranging from heavy monetary fines all the way up to suspensions, depending on what the footage shows. Bubba Wallace is believed to be under heavier scrutiny internally because officials reportedly view him as the driver who initiated the confrontation. One possible disciplinary scenario being discussed includes a fine somewhere between $75,000 and $100,000 for Wallace, along with the possibility of a one-race suspension if NASCAR determines the altercation became physical. Christopher Bell could also face punishment if officials conclude he escalated the situation after the confrontation started. Reports suggest Bell could face a smaller fine ranging between $25,000 and $50,000, although NASCAR has reportedly not ruled out suspensions entirely for either driver yet. And the reason this story suddenly feels so massive is because NASCAR has a history here, especially involving Bubba Wallace. Fans immediately started bringing up the 2022 Las Vegas incident with Kyle Larson, where Wallace received a one-race suspension after confronting Larson following an on-track incident. NASCAR has become extremely sensitive about post-race altercations happening on active pit road because crew members, officials, photographers, and other drivers are all moving around in a very crowded environment after races end. That matters a lot in this review. NASCAR officials reportedly view pit road confrontations differently than arguments that happen inside the garage area because of the potential safety risks involved. And if they believe things escalated physically in a congested area, they could absolutely decide to make an example out of this situation. Now here is the other side of this whole debate. A lot of NASCAR fans honestly do not want the sanctioning body stepping in too aggressively. There are plenty of people saying racing is emotional, tempers happen, and drivers should be allowed to confront each other face to face without NASCAR handing out suspensions every time emotions boil over after a rough race. And honestly, that is part of what makes this sport feel real sometimes. NASCAR is not supposed to feel robotic. Fans actually like seeing emotion. They like knowing drivers care enough to get angry after bad finishes. But there is still a line, and that is exactly what NASCAR is trying to figure out right now. Did Bubba Wallace and Christopher Bell simply exchange heated words after a frustrating race at Watkins Glen? Or did this become something physical enough that officials feel forced to step in before the next Cup Series weekend? Because if penalties actually happen here, this could become one of the biggest stories heading into the All-Star race. And what makes the entire thing even crazier is that Bubba Wallace and Christopher Bell are both Toyota drivers connected through major team alliances in the garage. These are not two drivers from completely disconnected organizations. That is another reason why fans inside NASCAR are paying close attention to how this gets handled behind the scenes. Right now, everybody is basically waiting for NASCAR's final ruling, which is expected before the upcoming race weekend. But according to reports, officials still have not finalized whether the available evidence is strong enough to justify suspensions. So at this point, the entire garage is watching, the fans are debating non-stop online, and honestly, this feels like one of those moments that could either disappear in a few days or suddenly explode into something much bigger depending on NASCAR's decision. Because if penalties come down hard, especially involving Bubba Wallace again, you already know the reactions across the NASCAR world are going to be absolutely massive. And honestly, no matter what side fans are on right now, this entire situation says a lot about where NASCAR is emotionally at this point in the season. The pressure inside the Cup Series garage is starting to rise fast. Drivers are fighting for playoff positioning. Teams are stressing over every single point, and frustration levels are getting higher every week as the regular season keeps moving closer to the cutoff line. For Bubba Wallace, that pressure is very real. The 23 team came into Watkins Glen needing a cleaner weekend, needing momentum, and instead they left with another disappointing finish. A spin involving John Hunter Nemechek, and now one of the biggest controversies in the sport heading into the next race weekend. That is not the kind of attention a team wants while trying to stay focused on the playoff battle. At the same time, Christopher Bell getting pulled into this whole situation is surprising to a lot of people because Bell usually stays away from major garage drama. That is part of why fans reacted so strongly when the footage surfaced. Seeing Bell involved in a heated post-race confrontation just felt unusual compared to the calm image he normally carries inside NASCAR. And now, everybody is waiting on NASCAR. Will officials decide this was just an emotional argument between two frustrated drivers after a tough race at Watkins Glen? Or will they look at the pit road environment, review all the extra footage and radio communications, and decide they need to send a message before things escalate further later in the season. Because make no mistake, NASCAR remembers what happened between Bubba Wallace and Kyle Larson back in Las Vegas. The sanctioning body already showed once that they are willing to suspend drivers if they believe post-race emotions crossed the line. That history is hanging over this entire story right now, whether people want to admit it or not, and fans are completely split. Some NASCAR fans think Bubba Wallace deserves credit for confronting issues face-to-face instead of hiding behind interviews and social media. Other fans believe he let frustration boil over too much after the contact from John Hunter Nemechek ruined his day. Meanwhile, there are fans defending Christopher Bell for staying composed during the exchange, while others are wondering what exactly Bell may have said that caused Wallace to come back for a second confrontation after initially walking away. That mystery honestly made the story even bigger online. Because without clear audio, and without either driver fully explaining the situation publicly, NASCAR fans started analyzing every second of the footage, trying to figure out what really happened between Bubba Wallace and Christopher Bell on pit road. And now, the possibility of fines or suspensions has added a completely different level of tension to the story. If NASCAR hands Bubba Wallace a major fine somewhere near $100,000, that becomes a huge headline immediately. If they suspend him for a race, this entire season could shift dramatically for the 23 team. Missing even one race at this point of the year could seriously damage playoff hopes. And if Christopher Bell receives penalties too, suddenly this turns from a simple post-race argument into one of the biggest garage controversies of the season so far. That is why fans are paying so much attention to every update coming out of NASCAR headquarters right now. Because this is not just about one emotional moment after Watkins Glen anymore. It is about consistency from NASCAR. It is about how officials handle driver confrontations moving forward. It is about whether emotions are still allowed to be part of the sport without crossing into territory NASCAR believes becomes dangerous. And honestly, that balance is tough. NASCAR fans love passion. They love rivalries. They love intensity. Nobody wants drivers sounding fake and emotionless after rough races. But at the same time, NASCAR also has to think about safety on pit road, crew members working nearby, and the possibility of situations escalating out of control. That is exactly why this ruling feels so important now. The next few days could either calm this entire thing down completely or turn Bubba Wallace versus Christopher Bell into one of the most talked about storylines in NASCAR heading into the All-Star race weekend. And you already know if NASCAR announces penalties, the reactions across the garage and across social media are going to be explosive. So now I want to hear from you guys. Do you think NASCAR should stay out of this and let drivers handle emotions themselves after races? Or do you think officials need to come down hard if the confrontation became physical on pit road? Drop your thoughts down in the comments because NASCAR fans are seriously divided on this one right now. And if you enjoyed this update, make sure to like the video, subscribe to NASCAR Nation Report, and help us reach that goal of 15,000 subscribers. This channel is still growing fast. And if you love honest daily NASCAR conversations from real fans who live and breathe this sport every week, you are in the right place.
Something inside Richard Childress Racing felt off this weekend, and it didn't stay hidden on the track. The Texas race, which was supposed to be a chance for a strong performance and momentum reset, instead turned into a frustrating and revealing day for Kyle Busch and his team. What started as a normal NASCAR weekend slowly shifted into a situation filled with tension, miscommunication, and growing disappointment that fans could clearly sense as the race unfolded. From the early laps at Texas, Kyle Busch was already fighting more than just his competitors. The car lacked balance in key corners, exit speed was inconsistent, and tire wear began to show signs that the setup wasn't working as planned. What should have been a competitive run quickly turned into a constant battle just to stay relevant in the pack. Inside the cockpit, frustration began to build as adjustments were made but failed to deliver the expected improvement. Each pit stop became more critical, yet the results never matched the urgency of the situation on track. As the race continued, communication between Busch and the pit wall reportedly became increasingly tense. In NASCAR, the radio is often the lifeline between driver and team, but during this race, that connection seemed strained. Strategy calls that were meant to recover track position instead raised more questions, and each decision appeared to add pressure rather than relief. For a driver like Kyle Busch, who is known for his intensity and expectations, moments like these can quickly turn frustration into visible emotional reaction. By the time the race reached its final stages, the situation had already escalated beyond just performance issues on track.
Reports began to circulate after the race, suggesting that an audio exchange from inside the team had surfaced or was being discussed within NASCAR circles. While nothing has been officially confirmed, the alleged content points toward clear frustration and disagreement during critical moments of the Texas event. Even without full verification, the rumor alone has been enough to spark